Today is the 19th of December 2019, and time in the UK is around about 8 o'clock. And we have present Peter, Marybeth, and Rick. And we are here tonight to exchange a few words around the topic of channeling. So, Peter, perhaps over to you. Would you like to open the subject?
Thank you, guys. So my experience with channeling is one where I don't necessarily feel like there is like a named entity or being, such as Yeshua or Cryon or any named entity that one might channel through, and then that being is speaking through me, and that I'm conveying its intention in a sense. It's more this feeling of I'm speaking, but I'm not in the way, in the sense that it feels like another person has asked a question, and then this idea has just come in as a response to the question, and then this idea comes in and I try to bring it into words. However, if somebody was to then ask me, what did you just say? I wouldn't actually be able to remember necessarily what I just said. So what I might have to do there is actually ask that person, well, what did you ask me? And then maybe we can bring the energy back in, and it'll maybe come in through in a slightly different way. And another aspect is that this thing that's brought in, I do it in a flow. I'm not necessarily thinking about it. It's just so often I'll be dancing, or I'll be not necessarily looking the person in the eyes, although that might also be happening. But it also feels like this idea comes in, and then I try to describe it through talking to them. But the idea is almost larger than I can necessarily put it into words. And the cool thing is that when I speak it, it will sometimes surprise me. Like the actual words are not necessarily thoughts that I've had before, or they might be actually a combination of thoughts I've had before. Often the way that they'll come through is that the idea itself is actually brand new, but the way I've articulated it is either an idea that I've heard somewhere, or a group of 2 or 3 ideas that I've heard somewhere that just click together into one idea for the articulation. But the actual idea and the way in which those words were put together is a new structure that I have yet to experience. So that's how an attempt at articulating my experience with channeling.
I put in a kind of contrast, throw in something in my experience of the channeling. I know I enjoy getting out of my own head, and because I'm, I have an old habit running things like a washing machine and focusing in on things, intellectual sort of stuff and prowess. But sitting back, it's to move into a channeling space. It's kind of like I can relax, and it's also then that there's this warmth of friendship that I feel. So that is something that opens a space for me. And Marybeth's often seen me, I'll settle down to the channeling and immediately I have to take the pullover off, because I started to get hot. There's this tremendous flow of warmth that comes down, and it's just like, they're like old friends, and it's kind of like, you haven't seen them forever, and suddenly there you are, and you're in the bar, and it's, oh my goodness, and it's like, what have you been doing? So, and then it's really presents and reorients me back into that space, which is a space that's familiar for me. It's like a space I've come from. It's as though before coming down, I spent a long time hanging out there. And I'm down here, and I've not exactly forgotten who I am. I have an awareness of who or what I am beyond the human form, but in this human form doesn't particularly remember. It's busy having its human experiences. It's busy, and I'm busy being it, having these human experiences. And so it's really nice just to lay back and be able to relax and smile, and then also to get a broader perspective and that is offered. So it's not about limiting or restricting or trying to define a truth too closely, because that energy comes from the viewpoint that everything's created and everything's true when you look at it from a certain viewpoint. So we create the viewpoints, you can't say it's not true, we've just created it. There's only one person seeing it that way. That's the truth from that perspective. So it's a very general, it's a very light space, but then that space can respond to energies that people have brought to the table. And perhaps myself, it might be Marybeth, or it might be our group, where we have some kind of group vortex, and so there's certain energy that would like to be able to respond in a way that's beneficial for everybody, that gives something to everybody, that helps people to open and see, typically in an expanded way, to get an expanded viewpoint of limited subjects. So I just feel it as this flow, and I connect to that space, and then there's this warmth that starts to flow through. And so I'm happy, and it's kind of like student days of going to the bar with your buddies, It doesn't sound quite right, but it's got that kind of a flavour of going back and connecting, and yeah.
So as you were speaking, I was thinking that in ordinary life, or in ordinary personal life, the personality that we become accustomed to has a particular narrow or rigid way in which it can think, or it can think, and it can receive information. And that what you're doing when you channel is you're relaxing that aspect of yourself, opening up the restrictions, and you kind of sort of said that there's like it's like a de-restriction in a sense, and then you can access more information beyond what you'd narrowly perceive. So there's a kind of relaxation there, where you relax and allow information to flow. You're not trying, you're not thinking or trying to do something, and then the better you get at receiving in this way, like the better you can transmit or allow this flow to flow through you, because it is just opening to receive beyond your usual like narrow perspectives. And I don't mean narrow that you're personally narrow. It's just that there's a certain rigidness within our own usual pathways.
So certainly I find that there's a certain ease that comes through me, because the responsibility for the ideas isn't mine, really. So there's some ideas being presented, and I'm more a connecting piece. If anything, I'm engaged in trying to put words to what's being presented. Whereas if it's me talking, I'm trying to make sense of it. Trying to think, what can I say here? To sort out this situation. Whereas when I'm connecting there, something's being presented, and I'm literally more like a translator, and passing on a message, and the message is interesting as well for me. I notice when I'm channeling, I don't always really hear all the message, because there's more focus on the mechanics of trying to put words behind it. And then, so afterwards, I benefit when, for instance, Marybeth may reread a channeling that we have transcribed, or rather she has transcribed, which is very helpful.
What's really interesting is what you got to at the end there was basically the same words as what Peter was saying to begin with. That your job in the channeling is to take that concept, that idea that's coming through, and put words to it. Really, I mean, that part of it was very identical. I've not felt it that way for me. I think sometimes I do look for words, but I don't know that I have felt it the way you've described it, Peter, as feeling an idea or a concept land and that being my job. I find more that I'm just in a flow. So like something just clicks on, and then I'm just in a different mode. When I was younger and I didn't know anything about channeling or what I was doing, there was this fun feel that I would always get when certain people came over and asked me questions. And, I started thinking, oh, that's my teacher mode. I don't know if being a teacher sounded like fun or something to me. But for me, it's that innate. When I wasn't aware of what I was doing or didn't know anything about channeling, I can still remember speaking to different people I didn't know very well. And the words that came out of my mouth were not words I had ever heard before from me or from anybody else. And I don't know if everybody has this ability, but I have this ability to see how people respond. And I could see the depth in which it touched them, whatever I said. And I remember sometimes in those moments saying, those words are meant specifically for you because they're nothing to do with me. I don't even know why I just said what I did. So, for me, there wasn't a trying to put words to thoughts that were there. It was just being totally surprised by what came out of my mouth. But I have the same thing when I write. So I know that I channel when I write as well. There are times when I'll use words that, oh, we got a echo going there. There are times where I use words when I'm writing that I'll have to stop and go look up what it means because I've never seen the word before. And I have no idea if I'm using it correctly or not, but it's there and it's part of, and so I'll look it up and it makes sense. So I, continue on. In those moments, I know it's not my mental mind working. And so from the way that we're talking, channeling, I would call that a channeled source, just because it wasn't coming from something that I knew.
So when you were in this teacher mode, you just flowed words. There was no concept that you felt you were trying to word, in a sense.
I just knew everything.
Hmm.
And I just got to this point where, I don't know how long ago I got to the point, if it wasn't back then. I kind of knew it back then, but I got to this point where I knew that it doesn't matter what people ask me, I'll know the answer. For what they want to hear in the moment. It's like I know that the answer will come through for them.
Oh, I totally feel that. I totally feel you there.
So there's
having that confidence is actually also having your door open.
Yeah.
In that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes fun then, because then if people want to talk and people want to ask questions, it's like, oh, that wonderful feeling is going to open, because it always does. And then you always get the response back from them. It's never just the feeling within me when it happens. It's always that connection with the other person. It's always something that opens up with them, and they light up, and their whole countenance opens. And it's something bigger than the 1 + 1. It's not just a 2. So I think that's part of why I've always enjoyed, what I would put words to channel, to channeling now, just by the way we're defining it. But it does, it opens with anybody that you're speaking with as well then. because they get excited, they get turned on, they get enthused. There's a real energy that happens then that's different than just a mental conversation.
No, totally. It's a kind of transmission of energy because they feel what you feel.
Yeah.
And that's a confirmation as well. And then I actually had this friend who I would, every time I would speak to her, I would get into this state because that's just the relationship we had. And if I would actually feel a bit down, I would call her so that she could ask me questions so I could get in a channel state and because not only would she feel really like sweet and like calmed and enthusiastic for life after the conversation, but so would I. And it was just, it is also a very much in dialogue aspect. I wanted to also ask both of you, how often do you feel this comes into your lives, like either by yourselves as well, or just in daily life, in interactions, or like not necessarily how often, but where does it come in a sense, or is it just random?
Talking here about the principle of channeling generally.
In a sense, yeah.
We've had periods where we do quite a lot of channeling, and then periods when we don't do very much. So I don't know if I have any particular pattern to answer for that.
How about application? Are there times where you bring it into your life for certain reasons? Like, how do you use it? And just take the time period off of it.
Yeah. If I want inspiration or upliftment is another. If I'm struggling with something, Marybeth's pretty helpful. She will say, "Oh, time for a channeling session," to get connected and so forth. Because what it does, that channeling process, I could be, say, at a certain level. Let's call it a lower level, but relative to what, it'd be higher than something else, but a slightly lower level. And then from that level, channeling and other things might not appear very exciting because I'm just not excited. But then with a nudge, for instance, from Marybeth, I say, okay, and then I open and suddenly now my whole energy gets lifted and now things start to flow. So, sometimes I recognize that channeling, would be really good. Sometimes it just feels really good to go and do some channeling anyway. Sometimes there's some specific issues where I get, quite excited to be able to support Marybeth as well with something that she might want. So the main piece about the channeling is that it does involve going into a lighter space. It's just a lighter space, and life itself can be quite very exciting. There can be some great things going on, but it can be quite routine as well. There can be a lot of dishes that need washing. A lot of carpets that need cleaning, a lot of paperwork that needs processing, and so on. And it's not quite like being in Disney. If you've got to process all of stuff. So having that source of upliftment, I find to be very empowering and very important in the flow of our lives. When did we start channeling? 2013? 2014? 13? 13.
Yeah.
Funny process thing, channeling as well, because if we're speaking and some people are thinking, oh, think I can't do that or whatever. Well, there's some things to go through in the channeling process as well, where I would be I'd have anxiety about it because I think I might say something that offends somebody. It might be complete rubbish, something else. But then after a while, you just kind of get used to letting it flow. And I've been amazed actually how a relatively consistent quality, comes through. Even the ones I thought that I didn't like, when I kind of read them afterwards, thought, oh, yeah.
What led you? How did you guys find out about channeling?
Well, I suppose we're familiar with the idea of channeling, and we've been with people who do channel. But then we had a particular personal experience, didn't we? Which kicked it off. Marybeth really recognised it and kicked it off. Would you like to tell that little story? That was a fun one.
Yeah, sure. We must have talked about channeling before then. In fact, the group that Rick and I met in Egypt, and the group that we were with, the James Tiveron that ran it, he would channel a couple times during that. So, we were both aware of what it was, and I think Rick and I must have talked about it. But we were cleaning out our flat at one point, and the rubbish bins are down around the corner a little bit. So Rick had gone out ahead of me, and I decided to prop the door open rather than grab a key and let it close and all that kind of stuff, because we were going back and forth. So I left the door open, which I guess you don't really do in London like I did from Grand Rapids, Michigan. So when Rick came back, he made a comment that, well, I left the door open and now somebody was in the house. And I didn't take him seriously in the moment, but we were sitting down like right after that. And he started telling me he felt Archangel Metatron's presence. Like we left the door open and Archangel Metatron walked in. So me being practical like I am, I said, well, if he's here, would you like to invite him to speak? And that to me was such an obvious thing. But to Rick, that was like, oh, well, that's an interesting idea. And so he started channeling at that point. Very impromptu, but I think probably coming for quite a while as well.
I think there was another channeling guy, a guy called Story Waters. He had created a course. You go through a channeling process. So that was kind of one person I did a kind of little with to try and get accustomed to the ideas. But I think my first piece of channeling was something that arose for me, a connection that arose precisely on New Year's Day 2000. So I had a need to reach out to a group in Arizona called New Tibetans. And I reached out to them on that actual day, on New Year's Day, and found out I actually managed to contact somebody. Elizabeth Harben, I think. She's died now, but and she linked me up to a particular character that the New Tibetans would channel. And so I went over there, and I did actually spend some time sort of channeling, but it felt very uncomfortable, and it felt kind of, didn't feel real, and I was self-doubting it, self-criticizing it, and so on. So it took me a while to get past all that and just say, oh, well, let's just see what comes through. I'm held. I mean, part of me in going for something, I like to feel this kind of love come through. I like love and warmth to come through. And, when I'm supported by that, then it's coming from that angle, and a gracious angle, and a certain sense of humor. That feels good.
It feels like when one is to begin channeling, it really needs to be approached with a sense of play, and also a platform needs to be given. Like in the story that Marybeth told, where she asked, well, would Metatron like to speak? It's like you might just feel something and almost like give it a platform, like give some space to an exploration of an idea or anything, and then channeling can unfold. But as you said, like in the beginning, there was just these doubts, and like, oh, this is silly. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I exploring this or trying to do this? This is nonsense. And that's just a closed door, so nothing can come through there. And you also said that you love a warm, uplifting energy. And to anybody that starts doing this and doesn't find a warm, uplifting energy, a warm, uplifting energy is there, but you have a familiarity with it and a practice. So you've opened up to it so many times that you can, the next time that you open up, it's easier. It's not like this big gate that you need to push open. You've like greased the hinges right up. You just like little finger it open. And these things are available, but it also needs to come through with a play, because you can't be like taking it seriously. Because it comes really with a flow and an exploration and a space or a platform given to that exploration. It feels like.
I think another piece that's important with channeling as well is to eliminate any question if one is having a go about doing anything wrong. Just let something flow. It's because you're establishing what you're doing is you're practicing a flow. You're practicing getting into a flow, which I think is very true of quite a lot of life as well. If we can bring that principle of flow into the channeling process, but then also bring that more into the way we approach life, and then that's just more fun. And don't worry if it gets a bit stuck or something. If you keep on flowing, it's like water; it'll wash all the rocks out of the way in due course, and then you wind up with a fairly wide, persistent stream.
A really cool idea I just had is like to assist in that flow. You could almost, if you do dancing or you do Tai Chi, because I do sometimes do movements while doing it. But also, you could just dance and give yourself the platform, like an open platform to, if I feel like saying words out loud, I will say them. And then just be like, harmony, this, and then an exploration of words and almost a self-conversation or an exploration in words gonna come up, and you can almost like record that and then just be like, let's listen back to that and see what came of it. And then that's just I feel like the dancing with it is cool because it allows a flow and a play, whereas just sitting there waiting or trying to do this channeling thing would be almost a harder way to begin to flow or play with it if one hadn't priorly done so. Just as an entrance point to somebody interested.
I think that's a great thought. Because it is, when the body flows, the body movement, it's just another flow of the energy. So if that's something that you're used to, and that's one way that you naturally flow energy already, that would make absolute sense to me, that words can start to flow when you're in that as well.
I think part of what we're trying to do in life is to find coherent ways of flowing energy. By coherent, I mean ways that can flow in harmony with the existing environment, can change the existing environment, so it's not required to just preserve, but there's also more harmonic ways of allowing change to happen in a more graceful way than in a powerful or destructive way, for instance, of that which is there. And the more energy we can flow, the more fun it gets.
And that's actually what we do with these conversations. there's an environment established, and then somebody in the group out of the three of us feels an energy that we can flow in that would be germane to the energy, and we flow it in, and then a new environment is formed and somebody else feels another energy to be brought in. It's very much like that.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes I made the mistake of thinking that, oh, it was the idea, so then you hook onto the idea, but then the idea's gone a bit flat. It doesn't seem to do it. Well, wasn't the idea? It was the flow of energy, and the flow of energy, like blooms on flowers, it brings all these things to life, and then they, and then they fall away. But connecting into the energy flow, and then also into our spirit as creators. So of creators, and then we've got a flow of ideas and the flow of energy to enable that to happen. Then that can really start to play through us, and that's really then a very beautiful experience. And I think channeling is a great way of it's literally channeling energy through, much the same way as a plumber will connect you to a water tank so you can get some water in the house. And without being connected up, then things in that example would be a bit dry. You'd have a drought. And I love it's also, I think, the different ideas. There's like a mix of ideas that comes through, because there might be 100 ideas, but it might be 2 of them that really jump out. And so it's not just like having one idea. It can be this abundance of ideas coming forth, and the energy just always seems to bring with it another great swathe of ideas. So that's never short of ideas. And something else that I found bound into that as well is the words I put around it. It's like the energy also contains its own instruction set, has its own operating manual. So it's not like you have to think, if ideas start to land, you don't have to, oh, but how could I do that or whatever. Just stay tuned into the energy and let it show you. Like water, it's finding the path of least resistance. So you stay tuned to the energy, and you start to understand how to move and flow with that. And then it's just, do you want to carry on flowing with that? Or do you want to work with another idea?
Very much, if an energy flow excites you, you just have to maintain a focus with it, or maintain a play with it. And then your focus on it allows it to play itself out, in the sense that you get that idea, and then you want to create that idea or bring it in more into your life. You just bring it in with that flow. But if it doesn't even feel entirely, you can actually just ask as well, the flow of energy, or how could we do this, and how could we do, like, how to bring it in a sense.
I think it's beautiful to know, connected to that source, there is just an endless stream of ideas, absolutely endless, at least for all practical purposes that I'm possibly aware of. And also, if you get given an idea, it doesn't mean you have to do it. It's just saying, it's like an offering. It's here's one possibility.
Also, the way that it's offered, you don't have to necessarily use it in that way, and it can branch off into another idea. And often making an idea our own makes it more workable, in a sense. Because we almost don't like to do somebody else's idea.
I'm not sure how that one works if you're going to start channeling.
Oh, that's very true point there.
Oh, my ideas. I'm going to do it. No, You said it came from up there. I'm not doing it then.
Oh, but it didn't come from me. No. Well, then let's just do nothing then, because
let's sit here and wait for an idea.
that must be mine.
Dinner I just ate. Whatever. Yeah. I think this is where, we have a certain beingness, and it's like being a human being, but really we also kind of morph a bit and can actually become the energy that's flowing through us as well, and have the experience of this, the energy. That there's many different kind of experiences possible. But a commonality seems to be, that source of energy, having a source of energy that you can connect to, and an idea or ideas. And then there's a flow, a purposeful flow of energy within the creation.
You were saying that the energy that you often connect to in a channeled state is uplifting and warm. Could it be also referred to as channeling if somebody was to connect to an angry energy or like a really dark energy, and then they'll flow with that energy and move with that and then create that experience?
Oh yeah, I'm really good at that one as well. It's just that that's usually not quite so deliberate. That's when I'm in my more reactive mode. But yeah, I find that if I start thinking, allow myself to start thinking negative thoughts, then from that perspective, if I've decided I'm looking over there and deciding, okay, this is a bad guy or something like that, then the energy starts presenting me more thoughts about how this guy's a bad guy, and how look, even his shoes, he buys the wrong shoes or something. I mean, it come up with all sorts of stuff to support that kind of thesis, because that's kind of the way it works. And this is useful to understand that, because you can build a flow around something that's that's negative, and it feels like it doesn't feel so consciously like channeling there if I'm sort of in a more reactive state, because I'm not really aware of what I'm connecting to. But when I then have the opportunity to stand back a bit and have a look and watch that, I think, oh, look at that. It's a flow of energy coming my way. And I had an experience recently where there was quite a strong one like that, and I started to feel quite unwell. And then, interestingly, I moved to more your dancing approach. And I started to realize I was tracking. One of the channeling says, watch the energy flows, watch where the energy is moving to and from. So instead of just trying to think ideas about it, watch the energy that's generating the ideas. And I started to notice this kind of energy coming in, and I found that I was able to kind of dance and catch this energy and just throw it back up. And it became a dancing process. And I remember I went from being really unwell within, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes, and I was just dancing, and my body felt really good, felt about 30 years younger. I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I think this is where you want to be selective about the energies you're connecting to. It's not that there's, in my sense, now that there are bad energies, because some people say, oh, you could connect to some bad energies and they want to do you in or something. To me, it's if you're drawing some energy, if you're looking to pull in some kind of energy that's a negative quality to it, you can encourage that flow. But this is where focusing on upliftment and joyfulness and lightness and graciousness and so forth, if that's what you're asking for when you start, then graciousness doesn't really mix with that hard reactive energy. Which one would you prefer today? I'll go for the gracious, yeah. So, yeah, I think very relevant. I think there's all kinds of energies you can connect to. And another thing that I've come to understand on the channeling front just recently, or started to feel from that perspective, is I had thought there might be energies that could intrude, upon somebody, but what I'm recognizing is that there's a bit of an unconscious pathway, which you actually, without realizing it, you're opening, because you're thinking, so you're allowing yourself to think some kind of thoughts, which is triggering an opening and then allowing a bigger flow to come through. And what I'm understanding as I've looked at that is that energy always will obey your command. We're like decision makers, and behind us is all this energy, and it will obey our command, including if we say it's not going to, then it will, do the reverse to meet the not going to expression. So that means that there aren't bad guys who can kind of, do things to me. It's really me connecting with energies that I choose. Marybeth's very good at that. She really holds a very clean space and a very clean energetic, principles. And you just don't get involved in troubled thought these days, do you? It just doesn't happen. I'm not as polished as her.
So could you say that then, that from a broader perspective, everybody on the planet is channeling all the time, in that sense, but we're channeling different energies, and something else that you mentioned is that the intention and reflectiveness as well, in the sense that what you try to do is be reflective throughout your experience, so that you notice the energy that you're channeling. And if it's not an energy that you want to be channeling, or not really, you view it from the outside, and then you put a new intention there, and you channel intentionally, and you intentionally bring warm and uplifting feelings, which are far more desirable, rather than unintentionally working with all sorts of energies. And that many people might even feel that they are just not actually choosing to be this way. They're not actually complicit. They're not actually co-creating that experience. They're being almost taken by it, and there's almost a feeling that there's no free will. And through reflectiveness, through being reflective and aware of what we're channeling, and being able to then bring in a new intention, we can actually reclaim our free will from energies that we're unconsciously channeling, that we don't actually wish to channel, and that we don't actually wish to co-create, and the effects of which we don't actually desire, and we might feel are inflicted upon us. We can, through reflective awareness, reflect and see that we don't desire it, and then through intentionally channel else things. Just on a broader perspective, could that be said?
Yeah, I think so. And one of the things I've noticed is that as I actually look for these energy flows, which is something that I'm watching for more carefully now and I'm a bit more attuned to, that to be influenced by something, if there's an influence on your energy, which is depressing something, whatever, any energy that you're drawing in that's having that kind of effect has to leave its hallmark. It leaves like a trail of breadcrumbs. You cannot be affected by something unless you're affected by it. And if it's affecting you, it's coming from a certain source. And that source might be a certain area of consciousness or whatever, or some repeated thought that a large number of human beings have had for quite a while, or something like that. It's got its own kind of energy coherence, if you like, and you're now connecting to it. And by recognizing what you're connecting to, you can also choose not to be connected to it. One of the principles for that, simpler ones, people have talked to me about needing protection. Oh, there's this terrible energy, I've got to protect myself from it. But that's giving that energy a command that actually it doesn't have. And a simpler approach is to simply reflect energy back. If you don't want it, it's just like saying, no, I don't want that. Just send it back. And expect the energy to go straight back. It's almost like the ability just to hold up a mirror, just put a mirror there, and the energy will go back, because the energy obeys your command unless you believe it's going to do something different, and then it's obeying your command by doing something different.
And in a sense, when you want to protect yourself from an energy, your actual energy is actually saying, I need protection from this, therefore it actually exists and it's actually coming for me. So it really is coming for you because that's what you're saying. How could you energetically reflect though? Could you explain that in more detail?
Yes. Been playing with that experience, particularly when I was having a difficult time a couple of weeks ago. It's like recognizing that certain energy was coming, down to me, and I would kind of catch it, and I would literally do a motion of moving it back up, and then as part of that final motion, it'd be like the hand would there'd be like a reflection, where that kind of energy, I'm not just taking the energy that has kind of got into my system here that I don't want and returning it. I'm also, you could say it's like saying a no, but I'm also saying no, I don't choose to have that energy. I'm not attacking that energy, I'm not criticizing it, but I'm just not letting it in, because we have, we have tremendous filters. To have a human experience means filtering out all the energies that would be available to have all the other kind of experiences that might be available. So the human system, the whole DNA and everything else, is a very specific set of filters that allow just one set of experiences, in a way, out of all the infinite experiences that different life forms can draw from operating in the planet. And so it's good to understand that there's a filtration system, and then it's good to actually to realize, I think just the idea of realizing that there's a filtration system and that it will respond to your command, because this is energy filtration. Once you just have that idea and start to nurture that idea, start to begin to expect it to happen, and then it grows, and that ability grows to manage energy.
So could we say, just to put it kind of how I was putting it before, that this thought that we don't, or this energy we begin channeling that we don't wish to, and then a reflective moment comes where we observe that that's the case, and then, like you said, kind of moving it away, that could be either a physical motion or an internal thought or motion to stop or to switch or no, and then almost to put a new intention in, and then start sort of a different energy, or peace or warmth or something else, for example. Could that be a way of sort of simplifying it into like a teaching form, in a sense?
Yes, absolutely. The keynote is anything that works here. So you need to get, another term might be a permission slip for it, something, a way of looking at it that allows you to say yes to the idea. So if you're trying to take the idea from somebody else, and then part of you is saying, is not believing it, or doesn't want to believe it, or is doubting it and so forth, then that's not quite working for you. So you're really looking for that idea that you could bring in, and you say, yes, I could do this. Peter has temporarily stepped out. We'll let the recording continue to run, and the expectation that he'll join us again in just a moment. Marybeth, your thoughts on that?
What part of it? There's lots going on there.
There's a lot going on, isn't there? Yeah. Mm. I find, Peter's comment that everything is channeling, and in a way, I can certainly see things from that perspective. But then you'd need to have another term for this channeling that's actually come, which is more deliberate connection to the spiritual essence. So I tend to reserve the term more for that.
Hello?
He's back.
The man is back.
The battery died.
Oh.
Just before I disconnected, because my battery died, you were speaking about a permission slip and how the idea that I came in with that could be used to switch about a negative energy. I really like the idea of permission slip, because it is literally how you feel works, and if you believe it works, it does in a way, and as well with what you just said about the chakra system and that alignment, you believe that, and then so that really works for you and creates this whole feeling for you, because that is a permission slip for you to get to receive or imbibe that, and essentially as a workable thought for anybody listening as well, it's a solution to an issue is just a solution that you can think of and imagine and believe that it can work, and then it works. So if there's an internal problem, an internal solution is just one that, well, if I do it this way, it'll work. And if it works for you, it works for you. Yeah. That really excited me when you said permission slip, and then it just like went black, and I was like, no.
I do like the permission slip. So there's really anything that allows you to realign your energy positively and creatively in the direction that you want to go. Anything that helps support that stability is valuable. It's useful. So if the thinking is, if you're more scientific, that's fine. If you're more poetic, that's fine. If you to think in terms of sports analogies, that's fine. Just using whatever the words and so forth that helps to get your energy positioned in a certain way. Because as you align your energy, then the energy can flow in accordance with that. And this, this is the classic one, I suppose, is the idea of the placebo, isn't it? You give somebody a pill and they think, oh, great, that's going to sort me out. That's allowed something to relax in their beingness and flow with that principle. Maybe the placebo, they know it's a placebo and it still works. Maybe it's just because they've got a lovely person who's actually giving them a pill. Whatever it is, something is happening that's altering that state. And our beliefs really do influence our experience.
Placebo is a very good example for that as well. And I remember, like, a friend of mine was like, "Oh, that's just stupid. That's just a placebo." But then it's like, is it stupid? I mean, if it works, maybe placebo is just a really useful thing. Like, we should use it more often. And I heard a very interesting story about something called the nocebo, because there's the inverse effect of that as well, and that you can actually also create negative things for yourself if you believe them. And the story for that is that there was this dude, and he had something, and it was going to kill him. He had a condition, and his doctor signed him up to a trial of a new drug starting, and this trial would be a cure for his ailment. He started taking the drug, and he was completely cured, like completely, like he was just full of life. And then when the trial finished, the study of the trial said that the trial was a complete failure and the drug has no effect to cure anyone. And when he found out about this, he completely went back to how he was, his previous condition. And when his personal physician saw this situation, he was like, well, this guy's super like prone to placebo working on him. So he said to him, okay, there's another trial starting and it's also experimental and it could also cure you. But there wasn't actually such a thing. He just started giving the guy sugar pills because he was like, this is going to help the guy. It will work. Let's do it. Let's see if it doesn't work, he dies. If it works, he lives, right? Well, better to try it. And the guy was once more completely cured. And then when he found out what his doctor was doing to him, like a while later, he died a few months after that. He found out, and it just so this could be used in both ways. And one aspect that is just a thought I've had about hospitals is like, in hospitals, how many people go to the hospital and get diagnosed with cancer and then die because they're told that they have a certain amount of time left to live? Of course, they're given the option to say, you know what, I'm not going to live this long. And many people leave the facilities and do go and start eating a healthier life and imbibing life. And I'm going to live my life to the full because I've not been, so like my body's just like cut out. But I'm just going to live my life to the full. And suddenly they placebo themselves into life and they are cured. But many people are told they've got a certain amount to live, and then they're surrounded by people in a hospital of death. And there's this whole thing going, and it dramatizes. And how many people are also killed by this? And that's another, but that's a separate issue in a sense. But it's very germane to what we're speaking about.
Yeah, certainly a good friend of mine, Lucille, was diagnosed with cancer. She was always a worried person, to worry about this and worry about that and worry about anything really. And she said she had cancer, and so of course she was worrying about the cancer as well. And then finally, when the doctor said, "Okay, that's about it. You've got 3 weeks to live," she suddenly completely flipped, and she said, "Oh, right." She said, "That's it. There's no point in my doing all this. There's no point in my going to work. There's no point in that. It's completely irrelevant. I've got 3 weeks. I'm going to enjoy these 3 weeks." And she did everything she wanted to do. She got in touch with all the friends and said, "Oh, I really wanted to say hello." And she was cheerful because I got my 3 weeks, but I've got my weeks and I'm talking to you, and that's what I want to do with my time, you know. And anyway, she didn't die, and then 6 months later, she was clear.
Wow.
So, you know, it is that when you start to invoke that different energy, it has different connotations.
Well, I think this is a good place to wrap up.
Okay.